now that everyone's here, we're going to get started. Good afternoon and welcome. I'm opening this joint meeting of the Multnomah County and Clackamas County Board of Commissioners. This is the time and place designated by the Secretary of State for filling the vacancy in Oregon House District number 38. I'm Jim Bernard, Chair of the Clackamas County Board of Commissioners, and I have been designated by the Secretary of State to chair this meeting. I'd like to start out by asking you all to join me in Pledge of Allegiance. Except I can't turn around. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So we have five commissioners present from Clackamas County and 5 commissioners present from Multnomah County. Two? Oh.
Commissioner Stegman is not here. Yes, she's on her way. She has
4.
got lost.
Okay. Didn't notice there was nobody there. 2 of our commissioners are in Washington, D.C. There's Sonia Fisher and Ken Humbertson, and they're joining us via Skype or something, FaceTime. Can you hear me, commissioners?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
We can hear you.
Okay. Commissioner Fisher and Humbertson also are viewing the event using FaceTime in addition to listening and asking questions via the phone. I'd like to introduce our staff supporting us today. Our clerk today is Kevin Moss. Our legal advisors today are Clackamas County Council Stephen Madcore and Multnomah County Attorney Jenny Madcore. And I just wanted to ask, who is the better county?
Clackamas.
Clackamas?
It's definitely Multnomah, isn't it? Isn't it, Mr. Madcore?
Clackamas.
You have to deal with that when you get home. Kevin, please call the roll for both Multnomah and Clackamas County Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chair Kafori?
Here.
Commissioner Myron?
Here.
Commissioner Smith?
Here.
Commissioner Stegman? And Commissioner Vega Peterson?
Here.
Chair Bernard?
Here.
Commissioner Fisher?
Here.
Commissioner Humbertson?
Here.
Commissioner Savas?
Here.
Commissioner Schrader?
Here.
Thank you, Kevin. And before we discuss the procedure here today, I'd like to welcome the 4 nominees chosen by the Democratic Precinct Committee persons of House District number 38 to replace former Representative Ann Leininger. They are Joe Buck, Theresa Kohlhoff, Andrea Salinas, and Neil Simon. You'll be singing us a song after this, right? It has been decided that these 4 will speak in alphabetical order. I'll now outline the procedure for today's meeting that were highlighted on the approved agenda provided by to the commissioners from both counties prior to the meeting. Each nominee shall have an opportunity to make a 2-minute opening statement after we take public comment, which will occur once I'm done explaining the procedure. The nominees will come up to the table one at a time, as called, to provide a 2-minute statement. Once the opening statements are completed, the nominees, except for Mr. Buck, will be escorted out of the room and into a phone booth, so they can't hear any of the questions until the time that it's their turn. This action is being taken to ensure a fair, open, and transparent process. After each nominee completes the presentation, they may remain in the room to hear the other nominees. I ask the nominees and the audience, please honor the system and not text or email the questions being asked to the other nominees outside the room. When it is a nominee's respective turn, They will participate in the question-answer session. Each nominee will be given up to 2 minutes to answer each question from the commissioners. Each commissioner will have the option of asking one question. During the question-answer period, we'll vary the order of commissioners asking the question, always ending with the two chairs. As the chair of this meeting, I will go last. We will alternate questions by county commission. This is not a public hearing, so no testimony will be received after the questions and answers. Once the question and answer session is complete, a candidate is requested to sit in one of the allotted chairs off there. Once all the question sessions are completed, each candidate will again be called up to the table one at a time, be asked to make a 2-minute closing statement. Clerk Kevin Moss will keep the time of all answers and statements. He'll show a yellow card when the candidate has 30 seconds left, and a red card when time is up, and a hook if you don't leave. At the conclusion of the interview, we will recess if needed. Following that, we'll begin deliberations. All commissioners will have a chance to comment during deliberations. Deliberations will also alternate by county commission. After comments are made by all the commissioners, I'll call for a vote. The vote will be made in alphabetical order, alternating by county commission, ending with the chair. Again, as the chair of the meeting, I'll go last. As provided by the Secretary of State, each Clackamas County Commissioner will have 5.4 votes, and each Multnomah County Commissioner will have 4.4 votes. The votes are weighted to reflect the share of voters or electors in the House District 38 living within each county. The votes will be tallied and recorded. State law says that a plurality is needed to appoint, so keep that in mind. It's not the majority that's needed, but a plurality. The person who gets the most votes will be appointed, providing that the person's total exceeds 12.25. If no one receives a plurality, that is, if 2 or more candidates are tied in a vote, and I'll call for another vote at that time. We'll keep doing this until there is a winner. I may call for additional deliberations if a plurality does not emerge. And with that, I'm going to open up the meeting for the public comment period. This section is limited to 20 minutes in total. During this section, members of the public may come up, provide comment up to 1 minute each. Members of the public should start by providing their name and address. I'd like to emphasize to the public that you do not need to take the whole minute. It's a lot of time. The quicker you are, the more people we can hear and with their short comments. Please be courteous to your fellow participants. So we have a microphone right there, and we'd like you to go ahead and come on up in order, 1 to 20. And you've got a little Christmas ornament. And all of you should come up so we don't have to wait too long. I suppose if you have a Christmas ornament, it doesn't matter what order you are. So go ahead.
Kevin had said in the interest of time not to use our addresses, just say which town we're from. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. My name's Jan Castle. I'm from Lake Oswego. Out of a very strong field of candidates, I think Andrea Salinas has a distinct advantage as far as being able to start accomplishing things immediately in the legislature by virtue of her long history of involvement as a lobbyist. She knows all the players, the dynamics amongst them, the right people to go to for alliances on particular issues. She is also very well thought of by people on both sides for her very respectful treatment of everyone. And I think you all know that those relationships are really key to getting anything done on the local level. I think she would be able to be a dynamic leader right out of the gate with basically a zero learning curve. And I think being a dynamic leader I'm done, would help her get reelected. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
I'd like to second everything the first speaker said. I'd like to have Andrea Salinas be the one that you vote for. I had the good luck of having her come work with me at a factory that my husband and I own in Lake Oswego. I've lived in Lake Oswego for 30 years, run a business importing shoes. 5 years ago, we opened a factory on Lakeview Boulevard. It has been very hard to manufacture in the United States, and I have been reaching out to government throughout those 5 years. I've always had people listen to me. I've had a lot of great response, but I've never had somebody work with me like Andrea did. She really drilled down with me, what is it that you need? We came to the conclusion that what I need is although there are lots of agencies that help people get government contracts, for some reason, nobody wants to go for getting a government contract. It's really complicated. And she said that she would go and find out why it's so complicated and how we all can get there. And so Andrea Salinas was awesome. So I want you to vote for her. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Judy Hammerstead, and I live here in Lake Oswego. I'm an over 30-year resident, and I'm speaking to you really from my background and from what I see in the candidates. I've worked with Joe Buck for the shortest period of time, but I've been very impressed with how Joe is able to accomplish things, and it's mainly through personal skills and dedication. He owns a small business in Lake Grove, which has become very popular, I think, mainly from his, never mind. I come to this from having been an 8-year school board member, from being an 8-year county commissioner, and from being an 8-year mayor of Lake Oswego. I think that the attributes that we're looking for in the next representative are clearly ones that Joe has. And even though you have a great number of people who are coming up for this position, and I think almost any of them could do a great job, I'm urging you to vote for Joe, vote for his work in Lake Oswego, and I think he would make a fine representative. Thank you.
Thank you. So I now have the red card, so you guys can see it. And I'll look to you. Your name and where you live.
Hi, I'm Paula Posadas. Andrea Salinas. Andrea Salinas is the right person for the job. I'm a small business owner in Lake Oswego, where I work with leaders on their talent and workforce solutions at Lake Oswego owned and based companies and with Oregon employers like Intel and Nike. Every day, I work with leaders to identify and select top talent for key leadership roles. A clear differentiator for Andrea Salinas is the specific and significant evidence of her skills and capabilities that support the business case that she's the right person for the job. She has the evidence of her ability to understand the key issues in our community, to influence, collaborate, and partner with others to shape and pass a progressive agenda. And she has owned and run her own successful small business. She understands the unique needs and challenges for business owners and what we need to grow and thrive in our community. She can build relationships, hear the voice of the community, create a cohesive strategy, execute a plan, bring strength and leadership, and drives change. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. Need a horn. Yeah.
My name's Amy Waterbury. I'd like to talk about Andrea Salinas' passion and strong conviction relating to the values of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Last November, when reports of racism at Lake Oswego High School shook our community and left so many of us feeling deeply saddened and disturbed, Andrea, along with a small group of us, felt compelled to act, to communicate loud and clear that Lake Oswego is not a community that tolerates racism and bigotry, and to stand in solidarity with members of our community feeling targeted and uncertain. We decided to organize a family-friendly, peaceful walk in downtown Lake Oswego for diversity and love. A week later, over 300 people showed up with signs of love and positivity and walked peacefully down State Street, and we've continued our advocacy work in Lake Oswego. Andrea's authentic and deep care for equity and diversity means that she does not wait on the sidelines for someone else to act. She leads the action. Andrea Salinas is exactly the kind of person I want representing me in Salem. Thank you.
Thank you. familiar face.
Just start up. My name is Charlotte Lehan. I am from Wilsonville, Oregon, and I'm here to speak in favor of, well, we have excellent candidates here. I'm here to speak in favor of Theresa Kohlhoff. I have known her for more than 30 years. I've always been impressed by her drive, her endless energy, and her impeccable integrity in everything she does, and also her truly astounding intellect. She is passionate about her community, her family, and the law, and she is compassionate towards those who struggle with life's challenges. While she's only recently become a candidate for office herself, she has worked for many years on behalf of other candidates. And one thing I can definitely say about Theresa, she never does anything halfway. She would make a dedicated legislator. Thank you.
Hi, I'm John Lamont. I'm a Lake Oswego City Councilor and former Planning Commission Chair. I'm supporting Joe Buck. I've worked with him behind the scenes, whether it's in front in the City Council or doing the log rolling and sausage making that we all do as county and city councilors and commissioners. He gets the job done. He thinks big picture. He listens to everybody. He's a big tent guy, and I think he'd be a great state rep. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Good afternoon, Jackie Mans, Lake Oswego. Great group of folks running for office. I'm here today supporting Joe Buck. I've worked with Joe on the Lake Oswego City Council for the past 3 years and have been extremely impressed with his leadership. He takes difficult issues and breaks them down for citizens. He reacts wonderfully under duress and stress, which we know we all feel at times, and will get the job done every single time. So I ask for your support for Joe Buck. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Cherie. I'm the field coordinator at NARAL Pro-Choice Oregon. Andrea Salinas has been our lobbyist for more than 3 years and was instrumental in passing the Reproductive Health Equity Act of 2017. We're especially grateful for her commitment to women's health and reproductive rights issues, but also for her longstanding commitment to her community and ensuring that all Oregonians have the chance to thrive. We and our constituents are urging the Clackamas County Commission and Multnomah County Commission to appoint Andrea Salinas to represent House District 38. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Latanya Chur. I'm here to speak on behalf of Theresa Kohlhoff. As a manager for a global auditing group, I really appreciate diversity, work product, and the integrity of work process. And as such, I'm proud to speak for Theresa today. She represents these 3 items. Since I met her in 1984, believe it or not, we've had several different relationships. She's been a community member of mine. She's acted as a parental figure. She's stepped in and been an employer when I've needed work, and I've also employed her as legal counsel. She's been a friend and a confidant. Since my youth, just last year, she has maintained integrity in all of the advice she's given me, solicited or otherwise. It's all been welcomed, and it's all brought me to a higher place. I'm a better person because of Theresa, and I know that this district will be as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm John Wallen, Lake Oswego. I'm actually the chair of the Lake Oswego School Board. And in fact, we're sitting in a classroom in one of the elementary schools our district had to close 5 years ago due to state budget cuts. Since public schools in Oregon are primarily funded at the state level, when we have a financial crisis, as we did with the Great Recession, all school districts in our state are affected. Everyone in the legislature knows this, and yet last year, no agreement could be made. I'm here to speak for Joe Buck. I think that our school district was fortunate in this past year, even though many school districts had to make cuts. Thanks to funding from our local option levy and schools foundation, Joe Buck, as a longtime resident and employer of our students, has seen the benefit that additional school funding can bring to a community. Joe doesn't have a magic wand to solve educational funding crisis, but based on his collaborative style shown in his tenure on the City Council, I believe he has the determination and skills to work with all members to find legislative solutions to critical problems such as statewide school funding. Thank you.
My name is Lisa Ortiz. I'm a resident of Portland. Until 3 months ago, I was in HD 38 as a neighborhood leader and a PCP, but I had to move thanks to my landlord selling the house. I'm here on behalf of servant leadership. A servant leader is someone whose allegiance is to the people. They're not in it for themselves, the power, the influence, or the prestige. A servant leader is tenacious. They know that the job will be tough, and they do what's necessary in order to get it done. A servant leader is honorable. They say what they mean, and they mean what they say. They have integrity and demonstrate it through their words and deeds. A servant leader is ethical. Their word is their bond. They seek fairness and equity in all matters. They advocate for justice, social, racial, environmental, and economic. A servant leader is resolute. They investigate matters fully, drawing on expertise and seeking wide counsel, and then make independent decisions. A servant leader is experienced, and they use their experience. And all that would spell Theresa if I could say sincere and authentic.
We were wondering.
Theresa Kohlhoff.
Hi, I'm Connie Lee, and I'm here to speak for Theresa Kohlhoff. I am a PCP in Clackamas Democratic Party and also a neighborhood leader. I've been a neighborhood leader through 2 election cycles. As Clackamas County Commissioners, you can choose whichever candidate you like, but it's up to committed Clackamas Dems to work hard to re-elect that person. In primaries, many burners worked phone banks and canvassing. I was one of those people. Our local Bernie group stayed together after the election cycle and became IPA, Independents for Progressive Action. IPA worked on issues because that's what burners do. As a member of IPA, I know that many of us work for Theresa's reelection, would work for Theresa's reelection.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Rosie Stevens, the former chair of the Clackamas County Democrats, a very active precinct committee person, and I'm here to thank you. First of all, you have a very difficult choice. There's some really good candidates, but I'm here to support Joe. He has the values that I believe we all share for a healthy future, a fair future. He believes in individuals and businesses paying their fair share. He supports funding the education system that we have in this state so that we don't have to cut the time, the days, and he knows the importance. He hires many young people working in his business. He has a passion for this community, and I believe strongly that he would be an excellent state representative for my House district. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Courtney Clements, Lake Oswego. Thank you for the opportunity to come and speak in support of Andrea Salinas. It's been fairly obvious over the past couple weeks that in our state and country that environmental stewardship is critical to the health and economy of our communities. And we're fortunate to live in Oregon, which is a leader in environmental stewardship, and a lot of that credit goes to Andrea Salinas. From clean fuels to removing toxic BPA from children's products to cool schools, Andrea's been instrumental in getting legislation passed to preserve our state's environment, protect our citizens' health and livelihoods. I encourage you to appoint Andrea Salinas. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Glenda Douglas, and I am a PCP. I'm a neighborhood leader, and I'm here to speak on behalf of Theresa Kohlhoff. I live in Lake Oswego. I've been a resident here for 40 years, and I am a longtime, of course, voter in House District 38. I'm also a retired teacher, having worked in Clackamas County and in Multnomah County, so I genuinely care about the people of our counties. And I also want to say that Theresa has the values that I believe in and that I support. And I firmly believe that the status quo right now is not enough, that we have got to move beyond that. We deserve more. Thank you. I strongly support Theresa Kohlhoff, and I hope that you do as well. Thank you.
Well, my name is Sunil Kumar. I own 2 small businesses in Lake Grove. I have known Neil Simon, who I'm supporting, for about 25 years, and I would have to say the best attribute about him is his integrity and bringing people in together. When we have different groups of friends and communities, he has done everything he could to try to get everyone combined, joined, and some of the best people I've met are from Neil Simon. And he has helped me grow and helped me throughout my life tremendously. So I strongly support Neil, and I hope you do too. Thank you.
Hello, Skip O'Neill, and I'm here to support Joe Buck. I've worked with Joe as a city councilor for the last 3 years, and it's been a real pleasure working with Joe. Comes to our council meetings extremely well prepared, adds a different twist. You know, most of us on the city council are quite a bit older than Joe, and it's nice to have that young, fresh look at issues from a different perspective, which Joe, I think, brings. And I think Joe has shown that he can run a very successful campaign, and I think he will probably, if he's not elected here, probably will run for that seat here. So I hope you all help Joe along in his career, because I think he would be a great rep, and I think he represents Lake Oswego and Multnomah County very well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Cornelia Gibson. I'm a retired business owner, longtime voter, House District Leader in 26. I'm an SEC delegate, and I urge you, the commissioners, I know you have a tough decision today, but I urge you to choose Theresa Kohlhoff. And the reason I do is because I think we need public servants. We need public servants that are servants with integrity. They are serving for the people, not for some self-aggrandization or purpose, not that everybody else. But Theresa has those qualities. She is a public servant, and we need those in the political realm today, and we need the grassroots support that she will be able to muster when the re-election comes up. I do strongly feel that Theresa Kohlhoff is our candidate for us. She is an able negotiator, and she will not compromise on principle. I dedicated many, many hours on her campaign for Lake Oswego City Council. She is an outstanding she's of outstanding character. She has demonstrated integrity, and has demonstrated through her political actions and life decisions. She has demonstrated that integrity.
Thank
so
you.
I hope you will consider Theresa. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Rob Wagner. I'm also an elected school board member. I grew up in House District 38. Southwest Portland since I was 3 and graduated from LO Public Schools. My wife Lori and I are raising 4 kids. All my siblings and parents still live here. I worked for State Reps Chris Beck and Greg McPherson. Knowing the candidates here intimately, the easiest thing for me to do today would be to sit on the sidelines, but I can't. Joe Buck is a friend and an incredible community leader. We spent the dark election night together drowning our sorrows in guacamole. I talked Theresa Kohlhoff into running for city council at Blue Moon Coffee last summer, and I served on her campaign and our finance advisor. I knocked doors for her in the rain. But I'm here supporting Andrea Salinas because she's the most experienced progressive voice who will immediately step in to lead. I've watched Andrea lead statewide coalitions in favor of pay equity, supporting children from getting poisoned by toxins and defending reproductive freedoms. And for me, as a woman of color bravely standing up to race hatred in our community stemming from the last election, she is an inspiration. I hope she can count on your support. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you very much for your testimony, and thank you, audience. We need to move that FaceTime thing over, evidently, so we're going to take a couple minutes. So I'd like to make sure that we still have 2 county commissioners in Washington, D.C. on. So please acknowledge you're there.
Yes, we are here. Ken and I are here.
Ken, are you there?
I am here.
Yeah. Is it a bar?
Not yet.
Not yet. All right, with that, it's now time for opening statements. The nominees, again, you'll have 2 minutes for your statement. Kevin Moss will show a yellow card when you got 30 seconds remaining. And Mr. Buck, you're up. Please join us.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Commissioners. In general, but throughout this process especially, I've been fortunate to meet with diverse people to hear both their hopes and fears, and of course many of those are shared. It's in the how that we tend to differ. It's also those differences that prevent Oregon from moving forward on issues critical to the people of our state and to our county and local governments. I'm the candidate with the broad perspective and experience needed to bridge that which divides and synthesize different viewpoints to carry action forward. As a city councilor, I know the important role the state plays in ensuring county and local governments have the resources they need to provide the services for their residents. As a small business owner, I know what it takes to keep an operation running day to day, to coalesce a diverse workforce, to both maintain and create new jobs, and to provide a safe, healthy, and productive work environment 365 days of the year. Employers and employees both have challenges, and it's important that our state representative understand them all, and I certainly do. As a former accountant, I bring deep knowledge of Oregon's tax law and the Internal Revenue Code, and as a veteran, I know the sacrifices men and women make on a daily basis to ensure our country stays safe. Most importantly, as a leader, I listen, I collaborate, and I put people before politics. I lead with my values, respect differing viewpoints to carry action forward. I would be honored to serve this district, to protect the most vulnerable among us, to ensure our natural environment is kept healthy and protected for future generations, and to create new opportunities as diverse as we Oregonians. To acknowledge those fears, to recognize the differences so that we can coalesce around and together realize our shared hopes for now and the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Kohlhoff, please join us.
Thank you for welcoming me. Where I am confident that I can be of help in the legislature is that I am a respectful, smart, and collaborative leader and a negotiator when that is what is called for. I ran for the Lake Oswego Council as a strong, self-identified liberal, and I won. I campaigned on affordable housing in Lake Oswego, and it became a council goal in 2017. On the council, I have good relations with the 3 Republican councilors and several relative centrists, even though we sometimes vote differently. A significant subset of state issues are the very same issues as that of the city. The skills needed, focus, the ability and diligence to do the homework required, the willingness to listen patiently to experts and citizens, to communicate clearly and vote thoughtfully are the same ones I use as a lawyer and a city councilor. I am an idealistic, pro-choice, liberal woman and mature. I say this because there are a lot of facts out there, some more weighty than others, and most changing constantly, leading to many theories du jour, and many quite contradictory. So my skills at making nuanced assessments build over time through experience in education and life lived is immensely valuable. The current critical missions are obvious. Healthcare for all is a life and death matter. The wealthiest have to pay more. We have to have mass transit to deal with climate change and with our own mobility. Everyone needs to have the safety of a home. Education is key for all people and throughout their life, and it is critical for our democracy. This is my vision for a reality that we can and must create. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Salinas?
Good afternoon, Chairs Bernard and Kafori, Clackamas and Multnomah County Commissioners. My name is Andrea Salinas, and first I would like to thank you for the time and energy you've devoted to selecting a replacement for Ann Leininger. I'm here today to ask you for your vote for State Representative for House District 38. For the past 20 years, I've moved progressive agendas working alongside members of Congress to protect Social Security and Medicare, and now at the state level in Salem to move progressive policies forward. In the Oregon legislature, I worked alongside union members to increase the minimum wage for over 300,000 low-income families. This past session, I was on the front lines to solve our housing crisis because everyone deserves a safe, stable place to call home. In the face of Mike Pence and the national attack on women's health, I led the coalition to pass the nation's most comprehensive women's reproductive health care legislation, including access to abortion. And for 4 years, I was the chief advocate for the Oregon Environmental Council and served on the board of the Oregon League of Conservation Voters for 8 years. I worked with state leaders to help pass the Clean Fuels program to fight climate change. And when the Trump-fueled hate speech entered our local schools, I looked at my 12-year-old daughter, Amelia, and I said, I have got to do everything I can to provide a future free from hate and bigotry, especially here in Lake Oswego. I co-founded an organization that promotes diversity, inclusion, and kindness over hate and division. My ability to get things done, the only candidate before you today who has moved a legislative agenda forward inside our state capitol, is why I've earned the trust from labor, environment, education, pro-choice, elected officials, and community leaders. Now I'm ready to lead in a new role as the state representative for House District 38, and doing it in a way that brings people along, leaving the door open, reaching out to lift others up, and bringing more chairs to the table. Experience matters, proof matters. I've done the job. I'm asking for your vote.
Thank you. Mr. Simon? Welcome.
Chair Bernard, Chair Kafuri, Commissioners, thank you so much. Everyone here, thank you for taking the time. In life, as in politics, people like categories. I want to put you in a box sometimes. It's how we make sense of things, by sorting things out. But like each of you, I don't fit neatly into any one category. Sure, I'm proud I've been a Democrat my whole life, but I also have worked to break down barriers and to build bipartisanship. I'm proud that I dedicated 10 years as a different type of public servant, as a journalist. But as a reporter, I never went with the pack. I pursued the untold stories, uncovering racial injustices, gender discrimination, and human rights, covering the US-Mexico border primarily. And I'm very proud of my wife and children. When we were expecting our twin girls against long odds in a Danish hospital system, we relied on their social health care system, and we received high-quality care at unbelievably low cost. I'll fight in Salem to make that part of our reality in Oregon as well. But in the government realm, I'm most proud of my history as a bridge builder, how I've worked on energy, environmental, public safety, and election transparency laws passed in sometimes deep red states as well at the national level with people of all political, ethnic, and national backgrounds. A third of this district does not affiliate with any party. They're tired of bickering and petty politics, and they just want a problem solver, someone with new ideas, new energy, a fresh approach, who can walk into Salem and fight for health care for all, education for our children, and keep the promise to our seniors facing retirement. And they want us to do it in a way that doesn't just respect our differences, but also heals some of our divisions. So this is what I've always done. For me, a third-generation Oregonian, lived in the district just over the line a little bit in Southwest Portland for much of my childhood. Reimagining politics to me is not just a slogan, it's a pledge to be different, to be present in new places, to listen in new ways, and connect people of all backgrounds to the great public service that we're all a part of. Appreciate your support. I'm asking for your vote.
Thank you, Neil. Will staff please lead the everybody but Joe out and put them in the cone of silence? Let's see here. Mr. Buck, please join us. Note that we'll keep. Please note that the time will be kept during your presentation. You'll have a maximum of 2 minutes to give an answer to each question. Again, the yellow card will indicate that you have 30 seconds remaining. Timing will start at the conclusion of the commissioner's question. Each commissioner will have the option to ask one question. Again, the order of the question for the commission will alternate by county commission, and the two chairs will come last. And with that, let's begin question and answer period. And Jessica, you're up first.
Thank you, Chair. A good evening, Joe. My question for you, how have you championed equity in the past, and how will you incorporate it into your decision-making as a lawmaker?
I've best championed equity in the workplace. So I employ a diverse workforce, from young people to students and family people to immigrants, everybody. A restaurant is a real melting pot. And in that diverse work environment, we have to work on a daily basis to ensure everyone treats each other with respect and respects one another as people, but they're different backgrounds and communication styles, and it takes a lot of talking and sitting down with people, and I think that I'll mention in the city. So aside from equity in the workplace, I noticed just lack of equity in the type of people that we're reaching out to. And so on the city council, I formed a youth leadership council to receive the voice of young people in Lake Oswego. And now that council is in its second year, and it provides young high school students that reside in Lake Oswego with the chance to weigh in on city issues and to be a voice for their own priorities. Yes, thank you.
Next is Sonia Fisher.
Like Multnomah County, Clackamas County's courthouse needs replacing. Clackamas County secured state funding early this year to begin the planning for a new building, and we're set to approach the legislature in 2019 with a larger request. How do you view your role in helping us secure this funding?
I support funding the Clackamas County's priority to fund its new courthouse, as well as Multnomah County's priority to fund its new courthouse. In working with the city budget, it's all about ensuring we're allocating sometimes it's about having enough resources, but a lot of the times it's about just allocating the resources that we have appropriately. And these infrastructure priorities, such as the courthouse, are critical and need to be funded. So it's ensuring that remains a top priority during the budgeting process.
Great, Commissioner Smith.
Thank you, Chair Bernard. The overall share of our senior population continues to increase. Given our limited resources, how can we help people age in place and remain in their homes rather than large care facilities?
One thing that we are working on right now in Lake Oswego to accomplish that, and it's not practical for everyone, but is the construction of accessory dwelling units and incentivizing, much like the city of Portland has done, the construction of those dwellings so that folks can either have the resources they need to remain in their house or to move into the accessory unit and rent out the other portion, or to live in a multi-generational situation, which I think is is ideal. I honestly don't think that the system, the current system of having to just what I've gone through with my grandparents, putting people into large facilities, is ideal at all. And I appreciate the multi-generational approach and what we can do to incentivize the construction of dwellings, and also realizing that seniors living on a fixed income are in a different financial situation than the rest of us, and making sure that we have the policies in place so they can continue to afford to live where they are. While the rest of us wages increase with costs and whatnot, when you're living on a fixed income, as expenses go up, you don't have the revenue to match it.
Thank you.
Well,
Great. Commissioner Humberston.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last session, a bill to increase the property tax exemption for veterans with disabilities did not get out of committee. What is your view on allowing counties to give veterans with disabilities significantly increased property tax exemptions, a decision normally relegated to the state?
thank you for the question. I strongly support the ability of counties to provide those tax exemptions to veterans. So having a veteran myself, albeit not a combat veteran, I know what, even as a veteran who served here domestically, but I know that system, even for people that just serve here in the U.S., takes a great toll on someone's mental health. And it's very, very, very trying. And I think that local governments, counties, and the state should be doing everything possible to help the men and women that put their lives on the line to protect the security of our country. Should be doing everything we can to help these folks reintegrate into society and to be able to live healthy, productive lives amongst all of us.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Stegman.
Thank you, Chair Bernard. Joe, which do you think would be a greater asset, experience or inexperience, and why?
Well, that's a good question. I think that a certain, between the two, I think a certain amount of experience just in government in general is somewhat helpful, to know budget process, to know tax code. I think there's just some certain facts that are helpful. I think that inexperience in this particular realm, if we think about the Salem realm, is an advantage. Well, for myself, I come with a fresh perspective. I would come serving only my community, the folks of Multnomah and Clackamas County. I have relationships with people here, but not relationships within that sphere. And of course, you develop those relationships over time. But I think it is helpful to come in with the fresh perspective, because I think we can all agree that while there have been many great accomplishments in the Oregon legislature, there's a lot more work to do. I wouldn't necessarily say that things are going really well. And this last legislative session was, a big mess. A big stress. Many legislators said the worst ever. So I think we need leaders who have experience coalescing, but not necessarily that. Necessarily the day-to-day Salem experience, because that isn't really bringing us too much right
now. Commissioner Schrader.
That's a nice segue into my question, Joe. If chosen, what areas or issues would be your particular priorities, and what specifically would you hope to accomplish in the 2018 session?
My biggest priority, I think that education is the foundation upon which we can build all other progressive policies. And I've been disappointed that Oregon continues year after year to underfund its education system, and not because of choice, because we don't have the revenue to do it. So raising the revenue to fully fund education would be my absolute top priority. I mean, it's great, the other accomplishments that the legislature has made, but to me, we're really failing the future generations when we have one of the lowest ranking systems in the country. And I hear the rhetoric around creating good jobs, and it's great that we've raised the minimum wage, which I strongly support. But fact of the matter is, if we don't improve the education system, these jobs that we're going to create, they're not going to go to Oregon kids. We bring in outside workers, and Oregon kids are displaced, and they're the ones that are going to face the most trouble. Education, top priority, but going along with it is raising of the revenue. I think that's the perspective I bring to the table, having that business perspective and being able to bridge that divide that caused the roadblock, that causes the roadblock every time. And business will always say it can't pay. We can't afford it. We already pay too much. You know, I mean, it's constant. And I bring the ability to really call them out on that. And I mean, there is such a thing as too much, but there's also being reasonable and investing in our future. And business in Oregon is going to be very hurt if we're not preparing our kids for a diverse amount of jobs.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Myron.
Thank you. Is this on? Thank you, Chair Bernard. So I have a question about healthcare. How should the state respond to uncertainty about federal Medicaid funding, and what should the state do to support health insurance access to all if the Affordable Care Act is repealed, or even if it's not?
Right. I strongly support the state pursuing a Medicare for all, health care for all program here in Oregon. If it's not going to happen right now at the national level. The healthcare system now, I mean, we pay so much into it, yet receive so little care. And even if folks, it's more than just everyone having insurance, because right now, even folks that are insured, the services they need are not covered. And decisions on what kind of care to render are all based on insurance instead of actual medical need, which is just preposterous. So with all the money we're paying in and the little service that we are receiving in return, something is awry. And I strongly believe that not only would a single payer system be more financially, would actually save money in the long term, but in the short term, ensuring that our Medicaid program is funded is a critical priority. I mean, the services that folks that do not have insurance or need are critical for people living successful day-to-day lives. Okay.
Thank you. Commissioner Savas.
Thank you, Chair. Joe, we've outgrown our transportation system. And though we know we can't solve congestion, we know we can relieve congestion. I'd like to know what solutions you see and how strongly you support those.
Well, I strongly support our current transportation plans that are underway. So the Sunrise Corridor, Phase 2, the Southwest Corridor Plan. Those are plans that are critical to creating new economic growth in both Clackamas and Multnomah County, and to moving people around more efficiently. What we have to be careful of, I think, pursuing those plans is important, but when we pursue them, we have to ensure that folks that live along those corridors are not displaced, as we've seen in other situations. So we want to be able to provide new economic opportunity and ensure that folks are able to live around that new economic opportunity, and that the workforce is not constantly displaced into the outlying areas, even though we've improved, transportation in that one. And that's critical. I mean, here in Lake Oswego, the workforce is being entirely displaced. Even the people that work in the city, that serve on the police force, cannot afford to live here in Lake Oswego. I mean, forget people that work in retail and the jobs that most people have. And so that's a big problem for us economically as a city and as a state, and it's a big problem for all the individuals.
Great, Chair Kafori.
Thank you. Good afternoon. We have a real issue in our community, which is a lack of affordable housing and an increasing number of people who are sleeping each night on our streets. Multnomah County has, and along the city of Portland, has put an unprecedented amount of dollars into helping address this crisis. However, it is a crisis all around the state. How do you view this issue, and what are your ideas for tackling this during the session?
I think it's important to keep to at least maintain the current levels of funding for the programs that help people that are homeless right now. So getting people off the streets and into beds, and enhancing the programs that will help them to get back, integrate into society. And I know that is very difficult, because a lot of times that requires substance abuse treatment and stable housing, and then being able to find a job, and then once you have that job, being able to get to it. And when you consider that even people that haven't experienced homelessness are having trouble getting to their jobs, and if they're in substance abuse crisis, getting treatment, well, it's even more difficult if you don't have a place, if you don't have a stable place to live. So increasing that funding. But also looking, so that's the kind of the charity piece of it, if you will, but it's important that we look at that justice piece, which is trying to prevent people from ending up in a homelessness situation in the first place. And a lot of that goes back to the housing, where people are being displaced and rents are increasing numerous times per year, which is just unacceptable. I can't afford, if my rent were to go up 50, 60, 40% next month, I can't afford to stay where I am. So how can we expect regular people, we just can't expect people to afford to do that, So I think that the affordable housing issue, as we all know, is very tricky, and there's no silver bullet to solve it. But I think that we can start by putting some parameters and just real common sense parameters in place to stop people from facing at least those increased rents, being evicted for no reason. It's very important. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. The metro area and the state have experienced heavy smoke due to numerous fires around the state. What discussion should the legislature have around this issue of forest management?
Well, what I've learned here in Lake Oswego in regards to forest management is sometimes that more trees are not always better. Sometimes you have to cut down some trees to keep the forest healthy. I believe that the forest management program is important to maintaining our natural resources, to ensuring that our ecosystem stays healthy, that wildlife has a place has a place to live, and that we can continue to enjoy the natural beauty that many of us live here for.
All right. Thank you. We got the heat right in here, but we need a bright light on the people answering the questions. Thank you, Mr. Buck.
Thank
and
you,
would
Chair.
you please lead Theresa in here? Well, I guess you, Joe, you can stay right there. Sit down. We're not going to ask you the questions again. Thank you.
We're having a good time in there.
Oh, yes. Ms. Kohlhoff, please note that the time will be kept during your presentation. You have a maximum of 2 minutes to give an answer to each question. Again, the yellow card, which Kevin has over there, will indicate that you have 30 seconds remaining. Timing will start at the conclusion of the commissioner's questions. Each commissioner will have the portion of asking, the option, of asking one question. Again, the order of questions for commissioners will alternate county commission, but the two chairs will come last. And with that, we'll begin with Commissioner Savas.
Thank you, Chair. Theresa, we know that we have outgrown our transportation system in this region. And we know we can't solve congestion, but we know we can relieve congestion. I'd like to know what solutions you see and how strongly you support those solutions.
As I said, and I've said over and over, I still think the number one thing we have to do is to set aside and prioritize mass transit. I mean that in terms of railway or light rail, bus, if it's express. I think the number one problem that we're all facing is climate change, and I can't fathom how we can continue as a car-centric society. Now, I'm aware that in the short run, that we have congestion problems that are soul sucks. I get that. To the extent that we can solve some of it through highway expansion, I'm not a big believer in that, but I get it that we have to get through some of this congestion. I'm always sorry to see the emphasis be on highway expansion, however, because it's diverting the funds that really do need to go to the mass transit. And I think that the young people in particular are definitely inclined this way. I know that Clackamas County is concerned about the Sunset Corridor and is concerned about I-205. And I think that that's part of the short-run solution, but not the long run.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Myron.
Thank you. My question is about healthcare, and I would ask how the state should respond to uncertainty about federal Medicaid funding, and in that vein, what the state should do to support actually health care access to all, both if the Affordable Care Act is repealed or even if it isn't. And what concrete steps you would take in the legislature, given all that's happened with healthcare transformation, and like I said, what's going on with at the federal level to actually advance what you see as a solution to this issue.
I hope I can remember all the parts to that question.
I know, it's a long question.
Well, let's start with what we have right now, which is very scary. And, we had the healthcare debate, and we turned up with the Affordable Care Act, which was good, but not perfect. And I think that this last few months were very scary for all of us because it is not at all clear that we will continue to have those Medicaid funds. And the state has put out a tax that came out of the legislature, which is also somewhat in doubt. So the system has, and I happen to have a granddaughter who's on Medicaid who couldn't live a month without that funding. So it's very personal, and you understand it when it is personal. So, in the day, I worked for the public option because it didn't look like we could ever get single payer. But I think that I always called it nationalized health care because I feel that that's where it should be, is on the national level. And we'll see, if we can get this Medicare for all. But certainly in the short run, maybe regionally, We take Washington, California, and Oregon and work towards single payer there, but I think that now the state has to take control of its own destiny. It's just entirely too rocky for us to rely on the federal government, even though eventually that's what would be best. Thank you.
Commissioner Fisher.
Do you feel there is an issue which Clackamas or Multnomah County or both has not handled the best way it could? And if so, what was it? And how would you have advised us to proceed differently?
I'm personally not aware of the present commissioners having problems with each other. We did have two that will remain unnamed that probably had some issues, and with Metro. I think that I haven't heard anything to do with Clackamas County and the immigration issue. I'm well aware that Multnomah County has taken a stand with the federal immigration people that I entirely agree with. I would think that we wouldn't want to press our district attorney in Clackamas County on that point, but that's the bulk of what I know. They're all looking pretty nice and happy, and no one is poking anyone else. So that's all I have to say on that, Commissioner Fisher.
Commissioner Vega Peterson, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Theresa. So my question is related to equity. How have you championed equity in the past, and how will you incorporate it into your decision-making as a lawmaker?
You know, equity means so many different things. My own family, if we're thinking in terms of diversity and inclusion, my own family it includes a number of different types of people. And once again, if your family, if it becomes personal to you, you get it. You absolutely get it. And I'm referring to my granddaughter, who is Latina. But when I think of equity, I have to say that I'm tremendously concerned about income inequality, probably the most, because I see that one group just flying off and taking all the resources and absolutely not being responsible or taking responsibility to help pay for that. And I see that as helping to reverse that, or at least make the wealthiest pay more, as part of what can help pay for many of the programs that we need. That includes the transportation, that includes the education, that includes all the things that are fundamental to making people, giving people a chance to live a life of dignity. It underpins the whole thing. So equity means, equity is fairness towards all. And yes, that would certainly be where I came out.
Thank you. Commissioner Humberson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last session, a bill to increase the property tax exemption for veterans with disabilities did not get out of committee. What is your view on allowing counties the authority to give veterans with disabilities significantly increased property tax exemptions, a decision that is normally reserved to the state?
The single thing that let's start with this. I do agree in home rule, and I would prefer to have those decisions that are of importance to the county and to the city be made at the level of the county and the city, because A, they know what's going on, and B, they're the most motivated to act on behalf of their constituents. So I'm not at all certain why the state would have felt that they were better equipped or in a better place to make that determination. I don't see any reason that they acted in a way that didn't favor the veterans, for heaven's sakes. The veterans are at positions of loss throughout the rest of their lives, it appears, in ways that continue to impact them. And so I don't know why it didn't pass, but I certainly would, for the reasons I just gave you, be in favor of that.
Thank you. Commissioner Smith.
Thank you. Good afternoon. The overall share of our senior population continues to increase. Given our limited resources, how can we help people age in place and remain in their homes rather than in large care facilities?
So when you get to en certain âge, you start to have to, you show how you've lived, but not always. There are things that happen that your good lifestyle just didn't provide bulletproof vest. And so to the extent that you're taking care of people all through life, they've had good health care, they've had good education, they've had a decent job and so forth, they also are at a point where they're better able to take care of themselves. So that's the first thing. But I'm also well aware now, even personally, that you get to a certain age and you're like a target. And you have all manner of people on you. So you hope that your family that you've also worked to strengthen all those years will be there to help. And then, to the extent that you need services, you need physical, mental, and other services, then I'm back with the single payer.
Commissioner Schrader.
Hi, it's nice to see you here today. So my question is this. So if chosen, what would be your priorities, issues would be your priorities at the legislature? And is there something specific that you would like to accomplish in the 2018 session?
Well, the one that isn't the only thing I would work on, because the ones that I laid out in my talk are ones that I understand are huge and would take a lot of cooperation and a lot of groundwork. But the one that I care about a lot is I would ask to be put on the Judiciary Committee, because obviously I've been a lawyer for 37 years and I care about the judicial system. And one case that I'm very concerned about that I would like to have the legislature look at and reverse is the case of Horton versus OHSU, which the nut of that coconut was that they gutted the civil jury trial. And I can't imagine why we would ever want that to continue. And that has to be a legislative task. But of the other things, it's to put a groundwork to be an ally wherever they needed me. I mean, I'm a good student. I'll learn wherever you want me to go. But these other issues are going to take a lot of cooperation, and motion forward. I think that that one that I just told you is quite specialized and one that I would be highly capable of pushing through.
Commissioner Stegman.
Thank you, Chair Bernard. Theresa, which do you think would be a greater asset, experience or inexperience, and why?
Well, see, here's the thing. Every day is a new day. And every day, something different comes up. So you may be well aware of, and by experience or by education or whatever, how things were, but they're not that way today. I mean, they're sort of that way, but they're not. So in a way, you always, no matter how old you are, have to be like a beginner. And so in that regard, I would say, you know, inexperience, looking at it as if you didn't know, is the number one quality. Being curious, being a student, learning. I mean, there's nothing else you can do because, you know, patterns change, and I referenced that a little bit in my talk, that, you know, people are constantly saying, well, this is how it is, and they've done some research, and then, you know, maybe that's foolish. We've had economics as our almost, you know, structure, as if that were, you know, a Bible or something, and it's just a social science. It's just it's just a template. So I'm going to stay with inexperience, freshness.
Chair Kafori.
Thank you. You talked a little bit about this in your opening remarks. One of the biggest crises that I see facing our community is the lack of affordable housing and the number of people who are spending the night on the streets instead of under a roof. What actions would you take at the state level to ensure that more of our neighbors can afford to live in their homes and fewer of them become homeless?
Well, one of the things right off that I know you're aware of is that our two counties are, in different parts of it, are quite different as to what their needs are. Whether they're older people who can't stay in their homes, or people who are living under the bridge there. I take the Greeley exit to get to my office, and about every 3-4 months, they get all those people out of there, and then they grow back, and it's just horrible. It's horrible. So my granddaughter didn't have disability housing. My daughter was carrying my granddaughter up 4 flights of stairs. I mean, so you have all these various needs. What I did in Lake Oswego was to introduce, with the help of staff, the idea of the ADU and getting the code so that it's sort of low-hanging fruit, making it less difficult to get in ADUs, and I noticed that the state is working on that. I know that Clackamas County started working on, you know, placing people, the ability to have housing in what before wasn't available. Those aren't perfect, and in terms of the people have asked me about rent control. Yeah, that's a tool. It's not perfect. It wouldn't work in Lake Oswego, but it's perfectly possible in other parts of the state, specifically in Portland, where that could be a good tool. So just acknowledging it, that it's a big problem. And it fits in with a lot of these other problems. It's like a concurrent problem. It gets us started.
The metro area and the state has experienced heavy smoke due to numerous fires around the state. What discussion should the legislature have around the issue of forest management?
So I know that Clackamas County relies on the forest for money, for revenue. And I have come to understand, though it wasn't something I've ever dealt with personally, but I've come to understand, as we all did, the tremendous potential, anyway, antipathy between some of the people in the county and the cities and the federal government, the Bureau of Land Management. I'm not a big fan of simply taking the forest management and saying, well, the bottom line is what's best for the economy. I can't go there. At the very least, you have to put the economic benefits along with just the benefit of having old growth, just leaving that as its own value, and not say, well, okay, the trees have got to go. If we can't, make some profit, then the trees have to go. So I'm not a expert on this, but my inclination would always be to save the trees to the extent we can, and then use and like a farmer, do a good job using what we have to earn the money we have. And I guess I would still leave the federal government as the ultimate manager, which I think they're going to be.
All right, thank you. Well, go ahead and take a seat over there, and staff will go in and get Ms. Salinas. I want to remind the commissioners to please speak closer to the mic. Audience and myself have had trouble hearing some of the questions.
Are you looking at me, Jim?
No,
Okay.
no, I wouldn't look at you, Martha.
That's okay. Usually it's me.
Ms. Salinas, please note that the time will be kept during your presentation. You have a maximum of 2 minutes to give an answer to each question. Again, the yellow card will indicate that you have 30 seconds. Timing will start at the conclusion of the commissioner's questions. Each commissioner will have an option of asking one question. Again, the order of the questions for the commissioners will alternate by county commission, but the 2 chairs will come last. And with that, we'll begin the questioning with Commissioner Smith.
Thank you, Chair Bernard. Good afternoon. The overall share of our senior population continues to increase. Given our limited resources, how can we help people age in place and remain in their homes rather than in large care facilities, and specifically lower income seniors who don't have access to ADUs and the like?
So I think Commissioner Smith and commissioners, I think the program that Multnomah County has in place right now for seniors is a good one, for seniors to age in place. I think that's actually a good model for the state, given that we do need care in homes, community-based care, where seniors can receive the care inside their homes rather than having to go to care facilities where it is way more expensive. As you said, we are going to see an increasing aging population, and with other types of care that's needed that's going to be much more expensive. Alzheimer's is going to be an explosive growth in our population, and that will explode our healthcare dollars. So we do need to keep seniors in their homes where folks can be pulled from the state. We have services right now through senior services that you can contract with the state and actually use those services to bring care, in-home care workers into your home. And that then what I would like to do, and I talked to Senator Bates for one of my clients about this, is to actually then take those people, because they are service sector jobs, to start building a real workforce around that, so that those care workers don't maintain just a care workforce for their entire duration of their careers, but actually start to build them so that they see a future for jobs, so that they can lead into bigger and better healthcare work. So those care workers that start out as in-home care workers can then maybe turn to CNAs or something else, but we need to give them that vision and the opportunity, so a type of career ladder from that, because we will have a lot of folks who are aging, and that those jobs will be needed.
Thank you.
Commissioner Humberston.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last session, a bill to increase the property tax exemption for veterans with disabilities did not get out of committee. What is your view on allowing counties the authority to give veterans with disabilities significantly increased property tax exemptions, a decision normally reserved to the state?
Chair Humberston, I think on a lot of issues that that counties and local jurisdictions have, I don't think it's the state's responsibility to preempt counties. I think if you are willing to give up that tax revenue, then that is your option. I think the state of Oregon needs to keep most revenue options on the table right now, given that we are, in such dire straits with services and with our funding deficits. But if counties see fit and can figure out their own budgets, then I think then they should be allowed to do that. I don't like the idea of the state preempting local jurisdictions.
Great. Commissioner Stegman.
Thank you, Chair Bernard. Andrea, which do you think would be a greater asset, experience or inexperience, and why?
A greater asset in this position?
Yes, as a legislator.
I think experience, and whether that means experience doing the job or life experience, I think both things can be brought to the table. I have been working with legislation and with different community organizations, different types of people, for a number of years, for over 20 years. So I think, from my perspective, I feel like experience goes a long way. I've been able to help people pass numerous bills, ranging from, the environment to healthcare to reproductive choice, to labor issues, to even trying to bring, new innovative projects like wind float off the coast of Coos Bay to the state. So I really think that knowing how a process works, knowing people, having relationships, both with staff and legislators and the governor's office and community organizations and people in my community, and knowing who to go to when I have questions, and I will never think I'm the smartest person in the room, I never do, so I always have questions, is really important. I really do think that, to be able to do that fast, it's a very fast process down in Salem, and so to be able to, pick up the phone, know who to call, know what to do, I think experience is necessary if you want to be effective quickly. I'm not saying that any of this is rocket science, but yeah, I think it's really helpful to have experience.
Thank you.
Commissioner Schrader.
Well, it's nice to see you here today. So I know that you have a broad experience at the legislature. So my question is a little more specific. If you're chosen, what areas or issues would be your priorities, and what specifically would you hope to accomplish in 2018?
So I have been working for a number of different groups across the spectrum, both low-income workers as well as communities of color, on things like healthcare, really. So the basic health plan, we helped pass a bill to get folks from the Compact of Free Association, COFA, so Micronesia, Pacific Islanders, additional health care coverage a couple of years back. I've been instrumental in trying to help figure out how we get Cover Oregon up and off the ground. And so What I would like to do is now figure out why is healthcare so explosive and still so unaffordable for so many here in Oregon. And one of the things that I worked on last session was prescription drugs and lowering the cost of prescription drug prices. That is one of the cost drivers, one of the major cost drivers in our healthcare system. So that is something that I would like to continue to work on. Additionally, there was some work that we needed to do to just close some loopholes in the Reproductive Health Equity Act that we didn't quite complete, and so I would like to finish that as well to make sure that there's a level playing field in the marketplace and that all insurers have to operate equitably. So those are two things. I also think, depending on what committees I would be assigned to, revenue is so incredibly important and would be critical to any kind of education work that I did for full funding of education.
Commissioner Myron.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I think my question builds a little on what Commissioner Schrader's, how you responded to Commissioner Schrader's question. But mine has to do with healthcare and how should the state respond to uncertainty about federal Medicaid funding, just that uncertainty, and as a lawmaker specifically, what would you do to ensure that there is access to healthcare for all?
So the first thing, I have to make a pitch that we should all oppose this referendum moving forward, because over 350,000 people under the Medicaid expansion would suffer. So that is a really, really bad idea, and anybody who is listening, anybody in the audience should take note of that. So please oppose referendum 301. That would be a first step. And then moving forward, so if that does actually pass, good God, we are in a world of hurt when we get into the session in February. We will certainly, that would be, I think, first and foremost, we'd have to look at figuring out, bringing those same players to the table, so bringing insurers and our hospitals back to the table and trying to figure out how we bridge that huge deficit to make sure that those Medicaid expansion folks are able to remain on Medicaid. So that's, I believe, how we would start the session. How we come to a solution would, I think, just be the mechanics of, again, bringing people around the table, bringing those players, those healthcare players around the table, making sure that providers are listened to, but certainly the payers as well.
Thank you.
Commissioner Savas.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, Andrea.
Hi.
We have, on the state of transportation, we have outgrown our transportation system, and we know we can't solve congestion, but we know we can relieve congestion. So I'd like to know what solutions you see and how strongly you can support those solutions.
So yes, I completely agree with you. This is a huge problem. And I-205 specifically is a huge problem. We do need to figure out a way to solve that bottleneck, especially on the south side, and increase the lanes on I-205. There's, congestion, accidents, and seismic safety that we have to address. It's, a huge corridor for not only commuters, but it's a huge commerce corridor. So I certainly support Senator Devlin's budget note for congestion pricing. I do think that tolling needs to be looked at more on a system-wide basis. We already do tax people on gas, so I think we need to think about how, and again, from a system-wide basis, I mean, people are having to move farther and farther away from their jobs, and so they're already having to pay more money. So if they have to put more money into a system on top of their gas taxes, it feels like a double taxation. So those workers for whom workplace and commuting are not right on top of each other and they have to go farther out, it seems like a double burden. So I would not want to see that necessarily, but I also know the struggles that we are facing with funding these projects. So I'm going to be very realistic, and if we can't get to better tax packages, within our transportation packages, then I realize that we'll have to look at other alternatives. So whether, it is congestion pricing or tolling or, increases in the transit tax, which I think would have all been hard but necessary, I would consider them for sure.
Commissioner Vega Peterson.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Andrea. So my question is to do with equity. How have you championed equity in the past, and how will you incorporate it into your decision-making as a legislature?
Equity is something I bring to my work and to the legislature every day. I'm a Latina. I'm the daughter of a Mexican immigrant. And it's something I fight for all the time. I represented PICUN, the Farm Workers Union, and CAUSA, immigrants' rights organization, when we passed the minimum wage bill. They were my two clients, so everything I did was from their perspective. In the past, I've also helped with pass the bill to cover all kids, to add 17,000 more children to our healthcare rolls who are able to receive healthcare. I was very proud of that work. I've been working with the Oregon Latino Health Coalition on that for a number of years. And then most recently, the bill that we passed, the Reproductive Health Equity Act, actually provides reproductive health coverage for women regardless of their documentation status. So everything I do it with an equity lens. I mean, it is really something that it doesn't leave me. I know where my family came from. I know the people that I grew up with, and so it would be strange for me not to have an equity lens when I'm working in Salem, and I'm really proud of the work that I've accomplished. I realize not everybody feels that way, so I'm also able to talk with others about that, and I like to approach the topic knowing that it could make people uncomfortable, but I think I am savvy enough and approachable enough that people can listen. Did I answer all your questions? Did you have another question?
No, that was everything. Thank you.
Commissioner Fisher.
Like Multnomah County, Clackamas County's courthouse needs replacing. Clackamas County secured state funding earlier this year to begin the planning for a new building, and we're set to approach the legislature in 2019 with a larger request. How do you view your role in helping to secure this funding?
So, well, given that the courthouse could fall into the river, we do need, this is another one where I'm like, we really need a new courthouse. This could be dangerous. So I would see my role as bringing together folks from the delegation. I've had conversations with some legislators, and I don't believe there's anybody from the legislature who represents Clackamas County who is in leadership. So that would be something that I think we would need to get on top of right away. We'd need to make sure that we work together as a team for Clackamas County to make sure that additional funding happens, because as everybody knows, funding is a dog-eat-dog world, and we need to get in there right away and make sure that our priority was a collective priority and not just one for one person. So I know the entire delegation, everybody who represents Clackamas, both Republicans and Democrats, senators and House members. So I think that's what I would probably work to try to achieve, is some cohesion and consensus around getting that funding.
Chair Kufori.
Good afternoon. Everyone has their priority issues on this table, you can tell. And mine, you will not be surprised to hear, is about affordable housing and homelessness. We're experiencing a crisis all across our state, and it is extremely profound in Multnomah County and Clackamas County. How can the legislature help? We've stepped up as local communities. We really need the legislature to do its role, and I'm sure you have some ideas on this to share.
Yeah, so this was one of my biggest disappointments from last session, HB 2004, which was a bill I worked on for my client, SCIU. They've had several members evicted over no-cause evictions. And then just this past week, actually, I was in a community organization group trying to figure out how we regroup and how we come back to the legislature with some new ideas and what it looks like. And, and there was talk and conversation about, Who do we need to bring in? Who do we need to talk to? What is it that the landlords need? What is it that the realtors need? Is there anything that we can do or provide on housing stock? We realize that it needs to be a multifaceted approach, that it can't just be one-sided, but we do know that people are suffering, and that we do, at the very least, at least from the tenant protection side, we feel like we do need to bring in something around providing a stopgap for tenants from being evicted as a first measure. So we would like to come back with something, but knowing that the votes on the Senate side have not changed, it could be difficult. So it could be a while, but we have some ideas around application fees, rental assistance, that sort of thing. But we realize that that's also just Band-Aid stopgap measures, and it's not anything that we can, that can sustain the folks who really need it. So there's more to come.
Healthcare, education, all those things aren't going to matter much if we burn up and blow away. Though the metro area and the state have experienced heavy smoke due to numerous fires around the state, what discussion should the legislature have around the issue of forest management?
Yes, I'm not surprised to hear that question, especially because I think I saw Chair Kafori twice over the last couple of weeks, and both times she was coming back from out in Troutdale. So she probably had dust in her hair. So I think that, I do think we need to figure out how we draw down as many dollars as we can from the federal government. I think they've left us short on secure rural schools funding. We need to be able to work with our partners on that. And I know I've had conversations with some of you on ONC lands and trying to figure out, what it is, given, that Clackamas does have so much federal forest land. So yes, how do we draw down those federal dollars? But also, some of this is naturally occurring forest fires. The problem is, and what's changing, is the intensity and the frequency. So that goes back to kind of an upstream, larger picture. How do we figure out what's the change? What's causing this? I would like to be having larger picture discussions around climate. And, how do we get a hold of climate change? And can we, figure out if a cap and invest bill is the right thing to do next session? And starting to work, again, with both sides, both chambers, Senate and the House, and, and both sides of the aisle, because this is becoming not just something that, is pie in the sky, unrealistic, but something that needs to be done now. It's really affecting, people in Portland, people in, the metro area couldn't go outside. Our kids were having to, forego PE and recess and things of that nature. Folks with asthma and chronic diseases couldn't go outside. That is, it's a serious health issue. So we do need to address it faster, and not talking about mitigation when we're talking about climate change either, but really taking an upstream approach. How do we get a hold of this?
Great, thank you. Go ahead and take a seat, and please bring in Mr. Simon.
You're still here.
Yep. We left, came back.
For holographic images.
Mr. Simon, please note that the time will be kept during your presentation. You have a maximum of 2 minutes to give an answer to each question. Again, the yellow card will indicate that you have 30 seconds. Time will start at the conclusion of the commissioner's questions. Each commissioner will have the option of asking one question. Again, the order of questions for the commissioners will alternate. Of course, you wouldn't know that. You weren't in here before. From County Commission, and the two chairs will be last. And with that, let's start the questions with Commissioner Schrader.
Hi, Neil. It's nice to see you today. So my question is this: if chosen, What areas or issues would be your priorities, and what specifically would you want to accomplish at the 2018 session?
Thanks for the question. You know, there was some good progress in 2017. There was also some significant things left on the table. When I got into this race, and one of the real drivers for me in public service is, what can we give people that they cannot give themselves? Families cannot give themselves more time. If we can get transportation right with creative solutions, starting with expansion of I-205, continuing with mass transit, working with the private sector for more telecommuting options, more flex time that helps not only grow jobs in our economy, but also give people back that flexibility that they crave, where they actually do more work and they're more productive. Those are the successes that I would work toward from day one in this upcoming legislature, and that I would pursue with passion in the out years if served and if reelected. I would still be a champion for lifting the twin burdens off people's backs of the cost of healthcare and education, but I believe we've got a strong chorus building nationally and certainly in Salem on those topics, and I'd be someone in lockstep for those key issues, because I know when we take those major costs out of the picture for people, we free them up to pursue their passions, to give more to our communities that we want them to give. So those would be my areas of focus, but I would put transportation first.
Great. Commissioner Stegman.
Thank you, Chair Bernard. So which do you think would be a greater asset, experience or inexperience, and why?
It's a great question. I don't think that there's any way that we could say that experience doesn't matter. I think that anybody looking for this job, and we all do, bring a healthy amount of experience at various levels. I happen to have worked with several state legislatures to pass election transparency laws. I've worked in the Congress drafting sanctions against human rights offenders from the Kremlin and elsewhere. I've worked with Oxfam and other NGOs around the world to hold the energy sector accountable for what they do in less than democratic regimes, shall we say. I think that experience matters. I don't think that anyone before you is inexperienced. I think that we all bring different experience that we'll be able to leverage to be as effective as possible in Salem. And I would say that as part of this conversation, we need to think about the relationships people have as well. And there's a lot of great relationships that everyone in this room has. The question is, could a new face in Salem, who maybe hasn't been down there the last few years, but does know some people, could I be that person that someone says, you know what, I wouldn't have necessarily talked to you yesterday because there's a D behind your name, but you're a new guy. What can we work on together? I hear you care about bipartisanship. How could we work together? So I think that's something that, for me, as a new face to a lot of people in Salem, that could be a great advantage. But I would certainly say that I have a strong of an experience and resume as my competitors today.
Thank you.
Hey, Commissioner Savas.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Neil. You
Hi.
kind of answered my question in your opening response to Commissioner Strader's, so I'm going to change my question just a little bit. So we have a lot of congestion in our area that's really been impacting a lot of communities, regardless of income, equity, environmental, whatever type of communities those are. And I'm wondering what solutions you see on the funding side for those. And you already stated a couple of those solutions, but I'd like to know what you see for how we fund those solutions.
You know, there's a small county in California called Orange County that had a little bit of congestion itself. I had the chance several years ago to work in a Republican House in the U.S. Congress to draw down significant funds to help address concerns in what were still Democratic districts, to really help their transit agency get the funding they needed to be what they became, a leading transit authority in the country. I work with the Association of Commuter Transportation as well, which is based in Boston but happens to be led by a Portland State grad. And we work on private-public partnership solutions that matter and create lasting change. So it's not just that funding conversation, but is how can we get more cars off the road? How can we reduce single-car commutes? And when you have business at the table, especially a larger employer who might have several hundred or several thousand employees, there's real motivation there for a solution because they don't want their employees to arrive at work tired and frustrated and grumpy and doing a PTSD road rage when they get to the office. They want to have their workers ready, rested, or maybe doing some work while they're commuting. I consider my rides on TriMet my VIP time because it's like, kick back, someone else is driving, I'm emailing county commissioners to vote for me. I'm sitting, getting some work done. So if we can be talking about how we can really help those partnerships take place and have lasting impact, then we're talking about creative funding solutions. Federal government, state government has got to be at the table, and it's got to be a major part of the conversation, but we can't forget about what can we ask, what's working with the West Side Economic Alliance that we might want to replicate in Clackamas County. Who else is going to be benefiting from the investments we make in the Burnside Bridge and when we have a more resilient county infrastructure? We all are, and the businesses are too. So I appreciate the question, and I look forward to being able to work with you on those issues.
Commissioner Vega-Peterson.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Neil. My question has to do with equity. How have you championed equity in the past, and how will you incorporate it into your decision-making as a lawmaker?
Thanks for that. One of my first, I think it was at high school, when I was involved in some leadership for a youth group I was involved in. We talked about how do you set up the room? How do you set up the circle? Is the circle big enough? Does everyone have a seat? Do you have to widen it out? Can everyone see each other eye to eye so we can have a real conversation? To me, that first leadership lesson is about inclusion, and it's about equity, and it's about how do we look at our communities. We're fortunate to grow up in the time that we're in. But I remember thinking when I first learned about the Japanese American incarceration during World War II, how sad it would be that if my best friend in elementary school, if we were alive just 50 years earlier, he would be taken out of the classroom just for his ethnic background. And it became something where I learned about an FBI-run camp in New Mexico during World War II, a secret camp that many people did not know about unless they had a family member there. I thought, there had to have already been a documentary about this or a book written, and I'd love to read that book someday. And I realized that there wasn't one. And because of what's in me, and from what I had done as a journalist before, and reaching out to lift up voices in the different majority communities that I lived in, El Paso, Texas, and Washington, D.C., I thought, how could I bring new voices to this conversation? How could we create a lasting document? How could we encourage Congress to examine the wrongs that we did in World War II? And I talked to families, I did interviews, I fundraised, and I would love to share the letters that those families gave back to me for the 90-minute documentary film that we ended up sharing with the world about those experiences and how those families said no one had ever come and reached out. No one told Grandpa's story. Grandpa's 87, and no one has sat down with him before. But because I did, and I orchestrated that endeavor, a lot of families felt, finally, my story was told. I would do that in Salem as well.
Thank you. Commissioner Fisher.
District 38 is comprised of the cities of Lake Oswego and Portland, and the district straddles both Clackamas and Multnomah counties. How would you choose to balance the legislative priorities of the four jurisdictions, which may not always see eye to eye?
Thanks. It's great to see you all sitting together today and being on the phone with us, of course, Sonia and Ken. But how we govern depends on three things to me: listening, learning, and only then leading. We might think we have the best ideas under the sun, but if we're not talking to people at every grocery store, at both sides of this district in both counties, then I guarantee you we're missing something. I've got the energy and just the love of doing it. I love meeting new people and hearing them and listening to them and having that learning moment where you go, wait, I thought I had a decent idea on that. Wow, that is way better. That's what we got to do. And elevating them, helping them see themselves in our agenda. Our agenda is a shared agenda. The transportation conversation is a shared concern. Air quality doesn't care what part of the county borderlines you're on. These things affect us all. And that, to me, is how I would do it, Commissioner Fisher. I would be out and about. No one's got to schlep down to Salem to talk to Neil. We're going to be early morning at the coffee shop. If we want to talk about expanding other transportation options, like getting away from fossil fuel taxes and moving more with the My Oswego program that really starts to think creatively about mileage-based taxation, let's go to the gas stations, have those conversations. Hey, you've got 5 minutes while they're filling up your pump. Can I talk to you for a second? What's on your mind? I want to serve you better. It's that attitude, it's that outreach, and that's inclusion as well. So that's what you'd get with me, and that's how I would approach the fact that, yeah, we are two counties, but we are one district, and I look forward to being able to serve the entire district.
Commissioner Myron.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. I have a question about healthcare, and my question is, how should the state respond to uncertainty about federal Medicaid funding? And as a lawmaker, what specific action would you take to ensure there is access to health care for all?
Yeah. It starts with a clear recognition that it is a right, that it's something that we all should expect, and that it's something that when we do take it off of people's backs, we create more opportunity and a better way of life. We came here for the quality of life. We stay here for the quality of life, yet we forget about how healthcare, housing, and education are such integral parts of that. At the state level, I'm not going to come in rookie on the first day in a short session and wave a magic wand and be the fix. But I do want to be part of the conversation. And I do want to support leadership's efforts and those like Mr. Greenlick who've worked on these issues to make it happen. If Massachusetts can put a system in place where they cover everyone, we can do Medicare for all here in Oregon. I want to help us get there. I think that it's critical that in light of the federal conversations, even today, I read an article in the New York Times about HHS spending money to publicize negative aspects of healthcare for all and negative aspects of the Affordable Care Act. It's disgusting what we're seeing at the federal level. It's a misuse of administrative resources for our federal government to be discouraging people from having a conversation that every civilized economy in the world has embraced. I happen to be living in Denmark when the Supreme Court was hearing the challenge to the Affordable Care Act. We're the laughing stock of the world when that is in our national media. Oregon can again be a leader in the world by saying, yeah, you know what? We know our president has yanked us out of the Paris Agreement. We know our president is undermining our healthcare access for all Americans. We as state leaders are standing up and saying, not here. At this state, this is how we're going to do it. And we'll find the ways to make those investments.
Thank you. Great. Commissioner Humberston.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last season, a bill to increase the property tax exemption for veterans with disabilities did not get out of committee. What is your view on allowing counties the authority to give veterans with disabilities significantly increased property tax exemptions, a decision that is normally reserved to the state?
Thanks for the question. And for everyone who served, thank you for serving, and thank you for serving. Our veterans deserve the expectation that we're there for them. It's more than a thank you. It's more than a platitude. It's an investment. From when they've come back, that there's a job they can get, that there's help that they can get if they can't get that job, there's help that they can get to have more education, And when it comes to staying in their homes, preserving the value of their homes, they deserve to have this as well. We don't have that many veterans in Oregon. I would say that this would be something that I can't imagine the opposition. I did not follow this or track this, Commissioner Humbertson, in 2017 legislature, but I'd like to learn more. I'd like to find a way to resolve it. I'd like to see the local counties have that voice, have that option to give that to their veterans, because it's something that can be done, it's something that is deserved, and if the state can help facilitate moving that conversation forward, I think it's just the right thing to do.
Great. Commissioner Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. I have another equity issue for you. Seniors, they're the most vulnerable people that I think that we have in our state. And the overall share of our senior population, it continues to increase. Given our limited resources, how can we help people age in place and remain in their homes rather than in large facilities through our policies?
I think part of that speaks to a degree of the unfinished business on the public housing agenda that the speaker carried in 2017, and allowing local governments to have the option for rent control. If I'm 75 years old, should I be so fortunate? I don't want to see my rent go up. I don't have to think about it even. It shouldn't be something that in your twilight years you're going, oh geez, now I've got to pack up and move again because I can't afford that jump and this jump. And so part of that conversation to me is putting seniors first in that housing conversation and making sure that those options exist for not just low-income families, but really thinking about that end of the spectrum. I appreciate you thinking about age as we're thinking about equity and inclusion, because when people think about equity and inclusion, we all think about it through our own lenses, and that's fair. But often the youth and the seniors are kind of lumped into, oh, well, we're talking about ethnicity. And that's an important distinction that we got to think about. Do we have youth voices? Do we have senior voices? And heck, for you guys, having a meeting in the afternoon with working families that have hard times perhaps having their voice heard at meetings during the workday, how do we also get those working family voices included? I would set up advisory councils on separate issues, and I would make sure that I had youth representation and senior representation on those councils, as well as a diverse array of communities of color represented at the table. I've already been having some conversations with different communities of color in Portland about what we could do in the metro area to make sure that we could create not just a mentoring loop, but also these advisory spaces where there's places for their voices to be heard by elected officials, and really make that as part of my effort to be more inclusive, do the outreach that matters.
Thank you.
Chair Kafori.
You talked about my housing question, so I'll ask you a different one. We've seen in the past few years significant changes to our public safety system. Bills passed that will keep people out of jail and back in the community, reducing our drug sentences, and trying to make the system more transparent through the grand jury recordation and examining police stops for racial profiling. Do you support these changes, and what do you see as the next horizon for public safety reform?
That's a great question, thank you. Several years ago, when I was a journalist in New Mexico, where I did my first job out of college, I was one of the first journalists in the country in that state, to be examining the police record about complaints and seeing the very clear racial disparities that existed in the Albuquerque Police Department on who they were pulling over. I made it a point to do quarterly stories on what was happening in this internal complaint process, where the complaints were coming from, and reaching out to those communities, often communities of color, to have that conversation and lift up those voices. It created great change. It created more local investment in their police review process. As I matured in my journalism career and then went over into public service staffing as a communications director in Congress, these issues continued to arise. I worked closely with Congressman Bobby Scott's office on juvenile justice reforms. And one of the first things I did when I was talking to his office was say, hey, wait a minute. Multnomah County's doing some good work. So I strongly applaud what we can do and what you've done to help not just say jail's the only option, prison's the only option. How do we do more community-based policing in the front end, and how do we do more treatment programs for drug offenders, and more, it's not restitution, but it's community conversations between victim and offender to build reconciliation tools that really have more lasting impact on having an offender say, you know what, I do want to change. I do want to be a more productive contributor to society. But the biggest challenge on the horizon is a lack of mistrust. It's completely broken down, and one new chief is not going to be the solution for the police side of things. But sheriff's offices deal with it too. I'm a member of the Citizen Police Review Committee for the City of Portland, appointed by City Council. I read the 150-plus page case files. I see the depth of the concerns. And the most frustrating thing is to talk to a young person who sees a public safety in danger and says, I don't want to call the police because they're not going to listen to me anyway. I want to do what we can to rebuild that accountability, and it starts with more community conversations.
Neil, you live in House District 38?
Yes, I do.
I ask that because I have evidence that the metro area in the state have experienced heavy smoke. And you probably did there too.
Got some ash.
There are numerous fires around the state. What discussion should the legislature have around the issue of forest management?
My hunch is you wanted to ask this question regardless of the fires. First of all, thank you for your compassion and your leadership, especially Commissioner Stegman, Chair Kafoury, but all of you, for what you've done for the east side of our county and Multnomah County, and the concerns we have for those who are over there. It's meaningful, and your leadership is meaningful, and the effect it has had in helping our congressional delegation to draw down the needed funds in what could otherwise have been a hostile environment in Washington, D.C., that's a huge success, and we should all take pride in that. And on an emergency level, that makes a difference. It's important. But on natural resources, I was just commenting on this a moment ago, of how we've lost sight of the rural aspects of our state. We've had a lot of metro growth, and that's great, and that brings a lot of jobs and a lot of revenue, and it's where we personally happen to live. But 75% of our state's a rural state. I work on a lot of trade issues, helping the United States export to the European Union and helping the United States draw in foreign direct investment from the European Union. The most disgusting thing to me on that conversation is when people are talking about cross-laminate timber, they're not thinking of Oregon. You shouldn't be able to think about any state in the United States and think of Oregon first. When you're talking about trees and natural resources, we're where you go. But they're talking about Canada and Japan and the technology that's racing ahead of us there. If we're going to be smart about how we get not just more capital from San Francisco Bay Area coming up here for our tech community, but how do we marry that tech community and all of the intellect that brings and all the capital that can bring, how do we marry that to the natural resources that are why we've been here for generations? I'm excited about leading that conversation. I believe it's an untapped agenda item by both parties, and it's critical to our economic growth, and I would love to have your support in bringing back that natural resource conversation when it comes to cross-laminate timber.
Thank you very much. Go ahead and have a seat. Now is the time for closing statements. To our nominees, again, you will have 2 minutes for your statement. Our clerk, Kevin Moss, will show you a yellow card when you have 30 seconds remaining. And Mr. Buck, you're up first. We turn the heat down a little.
There's no AC in this building. Thank you, chairs and commissioners. In a process where qualified candidates come before you requesting to sacrifice income and time to be able to perform what some have told me is an incredibly frustrating and draining job, a decision is difficult. Perhaps you want to give it to the person you like the least. But the question becomes who has the leadership style, background, and perspective that is needed in the legislature. I entered this race because I bring a style that builds teams, that bridges divides, and that unites and builds upon itself for even more future successes. I'm a promoter who always asks the question, who? And our district needs that type of leadership to move forward on education, healthcare, revenue reform, pollution caps, infrastructure investments, and all the many other varied needs of our state, especially education piece, which is the base upon which our other progressive policies can rest, as I mentioned before. I'm effective because I speak not from theory, but from on-the-ground experience. I have the background needed to show the courage that will bring the varied interests around the table in Salem together to find common ground, recognize differences, and move forward with action to realize our shared hopes. When Oregon wins, we all win. In my business, people come before profits, for there are no profits without happy and healthy people. And in Oregon, people need to come before politics. I respectfully submit that I am the candidate best qualified to represent the people, the students, the seniors, the workers, the retirees, the businesses, all people of District 38. I would serve with integrity, honor, and respect, and would like to close here today with a thank you to my family, my parents, my employees, and all the supporters who really stuck their neck out for me during this process. And I thank each one of you for your time and thoughtful consideration and ask for your vote here today. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mr. Buck. Ms. Kohlhoff.
Yes, I do act out of a big heart that cares, but do not be fooled. I am by temperament and trade primarily a fighter, a courageous, passionate, and formidable fighter. I fought to raise my daughters 4 and 5 years by commuting from Philomath to Portland to finish Portland State and get through night law school. I fought for my 6 grandchildren, one of whom is disabled. I fought as a lawyer against all comers, including the government itself and mighty behemoths of corporations for the little guy. It is not my style to get alpha, to yell, threaten, or be argumentative. I know the system, what to do, and I do it. I do it personally. I don't have low expectations, and I get results. I will go into the legislature with the same zeal and preparation, will use all my energy to get laws that will work for you and your constituents and will not bargain away rights. None of what needs to be done will simply be handed to us, nor can we message away the immensity of what we are asking for and absolutely must have. I am straight up and honest. I will always look you in the eye and always work to help and defend your work as government entities, you as citizens, and your constituents. I believe we create the reality we want, and what I want is a government that truly promotes the well-being of Oregonians. We are in critical times, and all of us have to be authentic, wise-minded, and relentlessly committed, but I am the candidate who is on fire.
Thank you. Ms. Salinas.
Thank you. As I stated earlier, my dad is a Mexican immigrant. When he came to the U.S., he was in the shadows picking cotton in Texas at age 5. No unions back then. But through public education, persistence, and finally securing a good union wage job, he was able to carve a pathway out of poverty. This experience is really what has fueled my advocacy work for the last 20 years, and it really came full circle when I was able to represent the Farm Workers Union to help pass the minimum wage bill in 2016. I do this work because for too many, the cards are still stacked against them. Wages aren't keeping up, college is becoming increasingly out of reach, and healthcare consumes a bigger chunk of families' take-home pay and small business profits. This matters. It matters for my daughter Amelia, your families, our region, and all of Oregon. She needs a future that affords a healthy environment with clean air and drinking water, that affords health care as a right, safe and stable homes, and innovative job prospects. I'm dedicated. I'm a hard worker. I've been doing this for over 20 years, and I haven't given up. If that's not commitment, I'm not sure what is. I haven't even been married that long. I am proud of the amount of sweat equity I've put toward making Oregon a better place and a better state for all. That's why I'm supported in this appointment by Planned Parenthood Advocate CEO Mary Nolan, NARAL ED Grayson Dempsey, former House District State Representative Greg McPherson, SEIU Local 49 Executive Board, OLCV's Executive Director Doug Moore, the Oregon Education Association, and countless others. I have numbers behind me. I do it for my daughter. I do it for my community. And I will continue to persevere until all of us can deliver on the promise of this state for everyone, but especially for our children. Thank you so much for your time in this process, and I ask you to vote for me, Andrea Salinas.
Thank you very much. Mr. Simon.
Hello again. We're living in uncertain times. There's unprecedented mistrust in our institutions. A third of the people in this district have basically said, forget it. They don't want to be a member of either party. And the lesson from that stat is clear. Right now, the status quo is the most dangerous place to be in politics. Today, you can vote for politics as they are, or vote for a new way. I encourage you to take the opportunity to move beyond the status quo. Vote to reimagine politics. Invite more voters into the process with new ideas, new energy, and new opportunities. I'll fight for your I-205 extension, and I'll fight for the Burnside Bridge. I've worked to bring billions of dollars to local transit under a Republican-controlled Congress before, and I'm ready to do it for us. I spent my adult life fighting for the underdog. As a journalist, elevating the concerns of women and children across the U.S.-Mexico border. As a legislative aide, helping the poorest people in the world stand up to big oil to protect their environments. And as a diplomat, helping fledgling political parties and reformers build cracks of social democracy against the backdrop of authoritarian regimes. Here in Oregon, I've got roots 3 generations deep, but politically, I'm not entrenched. I've given my time to community organizations like the World Affairs Council of Oregon, hosting foreign visitors to help my children understand from a young age what tolerance means in real life, and serving on the Portland Police Citizen Review Committee to do my small part to hold police accountable and reverse this cycle of mistrust that we spoke about. I'm ready to serve you and the people of this district. In more normal times, and perhaps different circumstances, I would say any of the other candidates before you would be excellent choices, and they are eminently qualified. But these are not normal times, and only one candidate of the 4 of us sends a clear signal to voters that you hear the current frustration and you're ready to help them reinvent a better future for their families and their children. I'm Neil Simon, and I'd love to have your vote.
Thank you very much. I know that some of the commissioners have some school-based things they need to go to at 5:30, right?
Yeah.
At 5:30. So do you want to take a short break, or do you want to just continue deliberation?
Plow through.
Okay, plow through. All right, so no motion there. We are back in oh, we're not back in session, we haven't left. All the commissioners are present. I want to just double check and make sure Commissioner Fisher and Humberston are still on the phone.
Yes.
Yes.
Great.
Been there, done that, guys.
All right, okay,
It's
so
8
we're
o'clock
going
your
to
time.
begin deliberation in a minute, but again, I'd like to go over how the process works. Like questions, the order of deliberation and comments will alternate by commissioner, but the 2 chairs will come last. After comments are made, all commissioners by all commissioners, I'll call for a vote. The vote will be made in alphabetical order, alternating by county commissioner, ending with the chair. Again, as the chair of this meeting, I will go last. As provided by Secretary of State, each Clackamas County Commissioner will have 5.4 votes, and each Multnomah County Commissioners will have 4.4 votes, but will be charging us to cross the Selwood Bridge on our way home. The votes are weighted to reflect the share of voters or electors in the House District 38 within each county. The votes will be tallied and recorded, I assume by Kevin over there. State law says that a polarity is needed to appoint, so keep that in mind. It's not a majority that's needed, but a polarity. The person who gets the most votes will be appointed, provided that the person's total exceeds 12.25, which I think is not impossible. It's impossible not to. So, if no one receives a polarity, that is, if two or more candidates are tied for the most votes, and I'll call for another vote. At that time, we'll keep doing this until there's a winner. So hopefully, or until winter. I may call for additional deliberation if a polarity does not emerge after that. Are there any questions? Nope. With that, let's get deliberating. We'll start with Commissioner Myron.
Thank you, Chair Bernard. First of all, I would like to thank all 4 of the nominees for participating in this process today. It is not easy, sorry, I feel awkward sitting over my microphone, but it is not easy to run for office, whether it's on the ballot or via a nominations process like this one. Each of you is really beyond qualified to serve the people of House District 38 in the legislature. All of you, and I just love this concept which was mentioned earlier today, all of you are servant leaders. You work for justice, social justice, racial justice, environmental, and economic justice. I've spoken with each of you, and I know of your work. When I had questions, I did research. I've received so many emails and phone calls and actual physical letters, which is impressive, from your supporters. As a result, my decision today has been very, very difficult. I look forward to working with all 4 of you in the future because I know that you are all leaders and that you are all committed to working to make Oregon a better place. You will all continue to be engaged in our community as a whole, and I look forward to that collaboration. I also want to thank my fellow commissioners today who joined me in this process. And finally, I especially want to thank everyone who is here today, who participated in the process, who provided public comment, who sent those emails and made those phone calls and sent those letters. I read them all. I tried to respond to them all. If you didn't get a response, I am so sorry. I did my best, and I really, really appreciate the participation. It makes a difference. As I considered who to support for this position, I thought about the role of a state legislator, what it is that you are tasked with doing. I considered the work you're currently doing and have done in the past, and how this ties into work at the state legislative level. I've considered the organizations that you've worked for and the causes that you have represented. I've also thought about who will be able to effectively advocate for the progressive policies that we need right now more than ever in healthcare, education, and the environment. So I'm first, so this is kind of, I think I can do what I'm not sure how the other commissioners will approach this. but I'm probably not going to do concluding remarks just because this is such a long process. So I am going to announce who I'm going to vote for so I have an opportunity to just say a few words. With all of this in mind, I am going to support Andrea Salinas today for this appointment. Andrea has a long track record as an effective advocate. I've watched her in action and am impressed by her ability to work with diverse groups of people while maintaining a commitment to really the core progressive values held by so many of our constituents. I know that Andrea is a person who takes on the right issues, does so from the heart, and represents them well. She's compassionate, empathetic, and smart. I am proud to support her as my choice in this process. Thank you all.
Now, we do have limited time, so appreciate the speech.
Sorry.
But,
Mine will-
first, huh?
Yeah, my comments will only be twice as long, so. I want to thank Commissioner Myron for actually everything she said, because I won't repeat what she said. I agree with a lot of what she said. I also was struck, I want to thank my colleagues, because believe it or not, we didn't plan our questions amongst one another, but we didn't really overlap. I mean, we really touched a lot of key issues, and I thought the questions were brilliant. And I think it helped me actually make a lot of decisions myself here today. One thing I will say, I'm just going to take this just briefly, is that there's a connection between transportation and housing, and there's a linkage between that and displacement and poverty. And communities are impacted by how we invest in what we do as government, and that's unfortunate. But I think that one candidate in particular identified that in his comments, and I think that was very interesting. That was just really, frankly, just volleyed up. We appoint people all the time on the commission for different committees, and I always look for community background, what they've done in the community. I think that's really an important key. Transportation is a big issue for me. I made my decision on House district appointments in the past based on transportation. I'll probably do that again. But I just want to thank everyone. I was impressed with all four candidates. Absolutely brilliant. I think you all bring something really special. And I was actually very surprised because I got to learn more about each of you. So thank you for your presentations and coming here and actually taking the initiative to seek out this position.
You're not going to give us a name?
I am leaning towards Mr. Buck.
Okay. Commissioner Vega-Peterson.
Thank you, Chair Bernard. Again, I completely third, I would say, the remarks of my colleagues in that I just feel that House District 38 is spoiled in the opportunities that they have of people who are looking to represent them in the legislature. And for that, you should be commended for the quality of candidates before you. I've also received and heard from many, many people about this, and so I appreciate the passion and advocacy that people have brought to this whole process. I was a state representative less than a year ago, so I think I have the most recent knowledge of what it takes to be in this position, to work effectively in Salem, and to really represent your district and the state in this job. And so this was a process I was really excited to be a part of in this commissioner role, and have just been so pleased with the quality of the people that have been forward. I knew some of you before, some of you I didn't, but I've really appreciated the time and the chance to get to know you and know that the commitment that you bring to this process is the same commitment you bring to the roles that you have, and that we're a richer state for that. That being said, I am going to be voting for Andrea Salinas for this position. I have worked very closely with Andrea in my role as a state representative, and the issues that I championed and that I was passionate about in the state are ones that I know that she has as her core values, and she'll bring that same passion there. I'm also impressed with her experience both as a Latina, as a small business owner, as a mother, and that I think that perspective will serve her well. And I know her commitment and her her dedication to issues, the relationships that she has will really serve her well and serve this district well.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Fisher.
Hello, everyone. All I have to say is, wow, what a great presentation by all of the candidates. I must say that I think that all of the candidates are qualified for this position, and I was extremely impressed throughout this whole process of the quality, the integrity, and the passion behind each of you. I just want to make just a few comments. I especially appreciate Theresa Kohlhoff's comments about justice and access to justice. I am very impressed and moved by Joe Buck's growing up in the community and the incredible work that he's done in Lake Oswego. I really appreciate Neil Simon's fresh perspective, and I was quite inspired by this process and his comments. At this point, I am leaning towards Andrea Salinas, given her breadth of experience and ability to hit the ground running legislatively. I am interested in what my fellow commissioners have to say, but at this point, I'm leaning towards Andrea Salinas.
Great. Commissioner Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This was really a tough vote. I've been on the county board for about 7 years, and I think I've been through about 6 of these. And I have to say, this is probably the deepest bench that I have seen for one of the appointments that I've had. We've seen some stars, but I mean, any one of you could actually, hit the ground running today. And one of the things that I talked about with everyone was about what I think is an equity issue, and it's around seniors. And understanding that seniors are vulnerable, but also understanding the fact that we have a lot of baby boomers who are going to be retiring, and about 10,000 baby boomers retire every day. So we need to be preparing, we need to have our legislative folks preparing for what's going to happen with the seniors who are going to be in our state. That being said, I asked each one, and I had no preconceived notions about any one candidate before I got here today, and I was equally impressed as I was in my office. But one of the things that I think is really near and dear to my heart that a candidate really captured what we need to do, because housing for nursing homes is really expensive. It's like $18,000 a month. And a project that we have done here in Multnomah County, which is Project Independence, which is also a state program as well. We keep seniors in their homes by having someone come and help them do light duties and clean and cook and maybe go shopping for them, and we maybe spend about $400 a month. $400 a month compared to about $18,000 a month is a huge, huge chunk of money. And I think we're better for having seniors in our communities and making sure that we have safety issues taken care of as well. But I think I'm leaning toward Andrea Salinas. She understands the mechanisms and the whole thing about, education and experience and non-experience. It's about understanding processes. So your education may not be in the legislature or as a lobbyist, but understanding processes and how things intersect and the intersectionality between the state, the federal, and the local government, that's what's key. So that's my thought on that one.
Great. Commissioner Humberston.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Having had the opportunity to meet and speak with every one of the candidates, I'm personally aware of how qualified everyone is. This is a no-lose proposition for our community. Everyone there is passionate and well-qualified for the job. However, there are certain values and organizations that I happen to believe reflect important issues in our community. And there is one candidate, in my mind, who stands out head and shoulders above the others. That candidate has support from women's health organizations, environmental organizations, and unions, all of whose values I share. That one candidate clearly have done homework on every single issue that was brought before them today. Doing your homework to that degree is a crucial issue as far as I'm concerned in anyone that represents our community. So with that being said, I am going to cast my vote. Excuse me. I'm going to cast my vote for Andrea Salinas. Thank you.
Commissioner Stegman.
Thank you, Chair Bernard. Having diverse perspectives at the legislature is important to me, whether that means having more representation of women and minorities or bringing a new perspective and fresh eyes. When I was running for my seat on this commission, I asked people to vote for me not because of my gender or the color of my skin, but to vote for me because I was the most qualified candidate with real-world experience that could have a positive impact on my community. All 4 candidates possess a wealth of experience with unique backgrounds, and each of them would make an excellent representative. I so appreciate the PCP committee's work and for forwarding such a competent slate of candidates. Because of their good work, it has made our job much more difficult. I want to thank each of the candidates for putting their lives on hold and throwing their hat into the ring. And I hope that if you are not selected, that you will not be discouraged and continue to work on behalf of your community. At the end of the day, I have to vote my conscience by selecting the person that I believe would do the best job and possesses the skills and experience that will serve the greatest good. And I believe that that person is Andrea Salinas.
Thank you. Commissioner Schrader.
Is it close enough you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. There's been a lot of talk today about servant leadership. So as I was listening to folks, I kept searching for something that I thought would apply to everybody here. And that is, allow the way to your great work to be guided by your service to others. So it is about community, it's about volunteerism, it's about mentoring people, it's about having a fierce heart. And I believe every candidate that was here today exhibited that. Mr. Buck, what I appreciated about what you had to say was really how you treat your employees, and that your business acumen is respectful and inclusive of people that work with you, not for you. And that to me was a very heartfelt, moving thing to hear and to know that that is how you operate. I'm going to tell you right now from my perspective that I think Lake Oswego still needs you. And the reason I think Lake Oswego still needs you is that there's a homeless man living on State and 3rd. And he's in a big white van, and he goes to the library every day, and he's kind of fallen under the radar screen. And occasionally you do see some folks sleeping on benches, and frankly, from my perspective, that needs to be addressed right now. And I'm looking at you too, John Lamont, in the front row there. Lake Oswego needs to do, as one of our biggest cities in this county, more work to make sure that those folks, the houselessness and the affordability issue is addressed. So frankly, as much as I would like to see you with the legislature, I would like to see you more continuing your work directly with what needs to be done at the municipal level and help be effective. Theresa, you're just a big, fierce heart. We all know that about you. You're fierce, you're strong, you're caring. And one of the new things I found out about you today that you didn't mention, but I found out that Oscar Romero was one of your folks who you loved the best. And of course, as many of you know, he was a liberal. He was radicalized in El Salvador because of how the regime there was murdering the poor and the destitute. And for that, he was murdered saying Mass in his cathedral, and I think he's now been beatified. For a while, the Catholic hierarchy stalled that. But then they realized that that was the wrong thing to do. And with our current Pope Francis, he's moving to sainthood. And I think for me, for my heart, that's what you represent. So I have to tell you, truly though, I don't want you to leave the city council yet. I'm sorry you don't. If there's a homeless guy living in Lake Oswego, and there's more, and the other thing I'm finding out, my two Lake Oswego colleagues, there are children that are living in motel and hotel rooms, evidently, so they can go to Lake Oswego schools. And that's got to be fixed. They shouldn't be living in a hotel or motel room. And I would like to continue to work with both of you on one of our main issues, and that is getting our cities, plural, not just Lake Oswego, involved in houselessness and homelessness, because there are some cities that still believe that is not a problem in this county. And let me tell you, it is a huge problem in this county. So I've got to be honest, I feel like I'm kind of being selfish with both of you. I know you could do the job down there. I know you could do it. That's not the issue. But we need you. We need you here locally, because if you don't help us, the rest of our cities won't come along with us. Quite frankly, they won't. Am I right? I see, yep, people are nodding here.
I'm trying to tell them to give you the red
to
card.
move ahead, okay. All right, so you've got the big heart, and Neil, what I love about you the most is you are just not a status quo guy. You are filled with enthusiasm and energy. I love talking to you. It's like one idea after another. And I think that, don't give up. I think that you need to keep moving up the ladder. I don't think it's your turn yet. I want it to be your turn, but I hope, I think I said to you, if you didn't get the appointment, that my hope was that you would continue to work. Okay. And Andrea, I'm going to support you because I have worked with you before on environmental issues. And I think which was most moving for me is to know that recently you carved out a pathway out of poverty for the farm workers, because that's what I had to deal with when I was working on a farm, and people didn't have houses, they didn't have food. I had to work with the Benedictine sisters. I had to see firsthand what it was like for people to toil and pull themselves up out of poverty, and I'm so glad you helped out Picayune. So I'm done now, Jim. Okay.
Okay. Well, both chairs can do math. So I would entertain a motion to unanimously support Andrea Salinas as House District 38.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to unanimously, well, we can vote on this and then we'll find out if it's unanimous. Support Andrea Salinas for House District 38 representative. Kevin, will you poll?
Okay.
Chair Kafori.
So, a point of order, if the motion is such, then that's going to be aye or nay, correct?
That's correct.
Commissioner Fisher.
Aye.
Commissioner Marin.
Aye.
Commissioner Humbertson.
Aye.
Commissioner Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Savas.
Looks like the ayes have it. Aye.
Commissioner Stegman.
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader.
Aye.
Commissioner Vega-Peterson.
Aye.
Chair Kafori.
Aye.
Chair Bernard.
Aye. With that, thank you very much for participating. And don't give up the boat. I did this myself against Martha Schrader a few years ago, and I lost.
And I've never been chair, Jim, so you won in the end.